2 weeks to the NFL draft.
What? That's crazy.
Now, 2 weeks for the Carolina Panthers NFL draft. 13 days for everyone else, or most everyone else, I should say. Because Carolina doesn't draft until this day 2 of the draft, the second round. They have the 33rd pick, which I'm sure a lot of you have already heard. They also have the 39th pick. They also have a third-round pick as well. Okay, a lot of people have heard that. That's totally fine. But Dan Morgan still has some things he has to figure out. He and Dave Canales in terms of what they've done. Now, overall, this offseason, I will say this. I've liked it so far.
Yeah.
Overall, I'll probably, if I had to give it a grade, I'd give it a solid B. Maybe even push to a B+. I love the offensive line signings. The Deontay Johnson trade was awesome.
Yes, that was a good one.
The long-term deal for Derek Brown, great.
Good
you
with
locked
that.
it up. Totally good with that as well. But there's still a lot of holes to be filled, upgrades, and needs. Now, Dan Morgan and Dave Canales, you're not going to fix everything in one offseason after a 2-15 year when there's a lot of needs. You're not going to fix it all in one offseason. I have to remind myself of that. And for you, if you're a Panthers fan, I got to remind you of that too.
Yes.
It ain't all going to get fixed right away.
No.
It's just not.
But I think we've said this many times. If we just see progression.
That's
it.
Progression. But there are still 2 positions that I think are on the high need of player upgrade. One on each side of the ball. Offensively, I'll start there first. Now, I still think that they need another wide receiver. You might even see them draft a running back. Obviously, the offensive line upgrades. I still think they might need a center to develop. But nonetheless, tight end? Anybody? Hello?
Yes.
Hayden Hurst did not work out last season.
No. That's
Right now, you're rolling with Tommy Tremble and Ian Thomas.
Yep.
Now, Tommy Tremble, I think, is okay. I think he's a good number 2 tight end. He's still young. I think he's just 23 years old, about to turn 24. Still pretty young.
Room to grow.
Ian Thomas, not much more than a blocker and a special teams guy. That's really about it. And I've seen a lot of Panthers fans are very high on Jatavian Sanders, the tight end out of Texas, who's like freak athlete, caught 54 passes in 2022 for Texas. Now, once you have Brock Bowers, who's like the number 1 wide receiver, or not wide receiver, tight end, might as well be a wide receiver. But the number 1 tight end in this draft, there's like a steep decline. Basically, you might be able to get a guy like Sanders in the 3rd round, even the 4th, which, okay, great. You still need massive upgrades at that position because if you look at all the top offenses, or most of the top offenses in the NFL, have a difference maker at tight end.
Yes.
You have a difference maker at that position. Just look at the teams that have played in the Super Bowl in the last several years. I was talking with our good friend Tim Donnelly about this. He's like, yeah, you've seen a lot of George Kittles. You've seen a lot of Travis Kelce's. You've seen Zach Ertz in his prime. You've seen Dallas Goedert, when they're healthy.
Yeah, and when Carolina, when the Panthers were at our prime, we had Greg Olsen.
Yeah.
So
even when Cam Newton came in, he had Greg Olsen and Jeremy Shockey. It's a difference maker, someone that can control the middle of the field.
Yeah.
They need that. On the defensive side position group, that's still glaring to me. Now, I know they signed Dane Jackson from Buffalo, but to me, it's corner. I still think they needed that anyway because J.C. Horn is so freaking good, but he can't stay on the field.
Yeah, when
he can't stay on the field.
Yeah.
Dane Jackson, who's going to be filling in for Dante Jackson, who got traded as part of the Deontay Johnson trade. Keep up with me here. But Dane Jackson might be a good spot starter to fill in, but you can't trust J.C. Horn staying healthy.
No.
Dane Jackson is like an average stopgap corner. You still need position. You still need to fill and upgrade that position in my mind.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's a young guy that you're developing or a guy that maybe you can step in and play right away, or at least is capable of doing it if J.C. Horn is not healthy and ready to go.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers exposed that 2 years ago. So.
Oh, yeah. And C.J. Henderson obviously is not the guy.
Yeah.
But I like that they re-signed Troy Hill. I actually thought he did pretty good as a nickel corner last season, especially late in the season. Really like what Troy Hill did. But to me, those are the big positions that are still needed to be addressed. And again, you might not be able to address it this offseason. Simple as that.
It's okay. Just chip away.
Chip away.
Mm-hmm.
Chip away. Address one thing, then move on to the next. I still think there's a long-term need for edge rusher. Like Jadeveon Clowney and DJ Wanham. Like those guys, I'm like, you know what? If they were opposite of Brian Burns, I'd be like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the Brian Burns.
We don't.
We don't.
That's the problem.
But again, overall this offseason, I give it a B+ right now for the Carolina Panthers. It's been good. Still a lot of things to fill, and the draft is going to be vital because Dan Morgan's been part of the drafts over the last few years for the Carolina Panthers. He has been. You just look back to 2022. There were only 3 guys on the roster just last season from the 2022 draft class. It was Ike Ekwonu at left tackle, Cade Mays as an interior offensive lineman who was not effective last year, and Amari Barno, who's awesome at special teams, who they drafted in the 6th round. That was it from your 2022 draft class.
Yeah.
You got to hit. You got to hit on this year's draft class. Otherwise, you're going to just have more of the same.